Amazing. We're live. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be going live again, this time talking about Neptune and Neptune entering Aries. We're going to talk about this 14-year transit. It's a really slow one. Neptune moves super slow. So honestly, I think it's going to be a shift for all of us, and it's especially going to be a shift for us from a societal perspective as well. You know, if you think for the last 12 to 14 years, we've had Neptune in Pisces, that's definitely a 12 to 14-year period where we were learning to deal with that energy, and now it's going to be something different, which is really exciting. Let me know in the chat, how has Neptune and Pisces been for you? Did you enjoy it? Are you excited for Neptune to enter Aries? Are you looking forward to it? I'd love to read through your experiences. But in the meantime, let's talk about the specific dates. So Neptune will enter Aries on March 30th. So just in a couple of days here now, in about 6 days. There is a couple of months at the end of 2025 when Neptune will retrograde back into Pisces. This will happen between October and January of 2026. So it's about, yeah, what is that, 3-4 months when it's retrograding back into Pisces. But honestly, from January 26th, 2026 onwards, it's full on Neptune in Aries. So I do feel like from March 30th up until October, we're all going to be getting a little glimpse of what could this transit be all about. And, you know, as I shared already, Neptune in Aries is a 14-year transit. So it's definitely, there's no rush to try and figure it all out in the next 2 weeks. But I do think that the next couple of months until October, we will start getting glimpses of, okay, what could this transit be for me or mean for me? And Neptune will stay in Aries until March of 2039. It's even insane for me to think about. It's definitely, yeah, quite a few years. Whenever a planet moves quite slow, the changes it makes in our lives is the most impactful and the most transformative. Whenever we have a transit such as Mars or Venus or Mercury, you know, how big of a change can it really make if it's just like a split 5 seconds when it transits over your sun or over your ascendant or over your moon? It can definitely feel impactful, but they're usually quite quick transits. Versus, think about a planet like Neptune, because it moves so slow, sitting on top of your sun or moon or ascendant for literally months, for literally like 2 years. That has the potential to have a much bigger impact in our life. So it's definitely a transit to be aware of, and that's also why we're talking about it today. So yeah, I'm very excited to dive into Neptune. So let's first chat about Neptune as a planet. And then we'll get into Neptune in Aries. And then, of course, we'll go through each of the rising signs. So Neptune as a planet, I mean, if you're sort of on top of astrology, then you would have probably heard it being referred to as like the planet of spirituality. And to a certain extent, that is true. But Neptune is so much more. Neptune is this awareness, this perspective of something greater. It's the sort of awareness of, well, I don't want to get mad about the fact that I've been waiting in this grocery line for 10 minutes because this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of life. Even though, when you're in that situation, you're probably not thinking like, "Oh, I'm so spiritual, look at me." That in essence is the doing, or is encompassed by Neptune as a planet. So anytime in life where you're able to keep that sort of perspective of, well, this is such a tiny, insignificant thing in the grand scheme of life, it doesn't matter. We're talking about Neptune. When you can think of this idea of we're all composed of atoms, and actually, most of us are just space between atoms. Most of us are, or all of us, I should say, are mostly empty space. Thinking about those types of topics, that is also all about the planet Neptune. That is also embodied by Neptune. Perspectives or ideas or beliefs that we have that help remind us of the fact that we're not that significant, they're not that important. Even though, when I'm thinking about atoms and empty spaces, I'm not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm spiritual. But that is also this perspective that Neptune tries to provide for us. And Neptune is also about this idea of, it doesn't really matter how much we achieve in this life, because, not to get too morbid, we're all going to die, and we're all probably going to be buried right next to each other in the same piece of dirt. And this sort of perspective, or this sort of thinking, can hopefully, or does hopefully, give us perspective on what truly matters when we're here. On the fact that maybe we shouldn't treat whatever, this homeless person, or this person that's below us at the workplace, that's in the layer below us, to also treat them with respect. Even though you're not thinking of yourself necessarily as spiritual, when you think about, yeah, it doesn't matter if I have more money than this person, inherently we're all the same. That is, again, one of the perspectives, one of the ideas embodied by the planet Neptune. Neptune also embodies this feeling of having an intuition, or a feeling, or knowing something, even though we might not have tangible proof. So there might be some sort of invisible proof of something. And we might therefore have this sort of invisible proof, whether it's just a feeling that we have in our stomach, that maybe that's not the right job, or that's not the right relationship. This is also the idea, or the feeling, that's also embodied by the planet Neptune. So being able to trust our intuition. Neptune also is the planet that makes us a little bit more susceptible, or a little bit more aware of the pain of others. Whenever we're able to sympathize with somebody, whenever we are able to, look at a homeless person and think, wow, that could be my brother. You look at that person and you think, wow, I really see my brother in them. Even though in that moment you might not feel very spiritual, these types of feelings, having this sort of emotional reaction in that moment, recognizing the humanity in that homeless person, for example, that is also another feeling, another idea that's embodied by the planet Neptune. Neptune, let's talk a little bit about the dangers of it. And if you have any questions about Neptune, please drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. Neptune can also cause confusion or uncertainty. Remember, we talked about Neptune is this sort of like you have a feeling of something or you know something, but you don't have tangible proof. That can cause quite a bit of uncertainty or unclarity or confusion because you're like, yeah, I think I sort of feel this, but I don't have any tangible proof. Like, oh, what is really real or what is not really real? Is this just really a feeling that I have, or is it really true? Uh, as we talk about the rising sign horoscopes in a couple of minutes, we will we will talk about like what area of your life this will impact. Those areas might also have some confusion to them in the next 14 years, some unclarity. It might be difficult to see things clearly or the way they are. Um, it might feel like your judgment is maybe a bit clouded when it comes to those things. And of course, with Neptune, if we do keep, or if we do have this perspective of, well, it doesn't matter if I have more money. At the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all gonna die. Taken out of the extreme, or taken to the extreme, that can cause feelings of unattachment, disengagement with life, a feeling of like, well, nothing matters then, I guess. YOLO, as we all used to say back 10 years ago. It can lead to this feeling of, well, yeah, why even get up out of bed? Why even go live on YouTube? Why even show up to work? We're all gonna die. Um, so that can be one of the dangers of Neptune as well. And we talked about Neptune being about this feeling of empathy and feeling of relating to the humanity in all of us, seeing that homeless person and thinking, wow, that could be me, that could be my brother, that could be my sister. Because of that, there can be a danger for us to want to numb that sensitivity or that pain. It can feel like there is a lot of hurt in the world. There's a lot of pain in the world. If you open yourself up to it and really sympathize with the humanity of every homeless person you see, you're never going to make it home after work. You're going to be on the street crying and helping all of these people. And I do think to a certain extent, if Neptune is taken to the extreme, there can be a lot of pain, a lot of sensitivity, and it can be too much to handle, which can lead to numbing of the pain. And this is why you often hear Neptune being sort of the planet of addicts. Uh, it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol, but anything that helps distract us from what's really going on and disengages us from what we're really feeling. It can be scrolling on Instagram. Again, doesn't need to be, hardcore addiction as the way we've thought of it through the last years. So definitely keep in mind that no planet is good entirely, no planet is bad entirely. It's always about a spectrum, or a spectrum, I guess is the right word. And there can be different ways that we engage with it. And it's good to sort of reflect for yourself, going into Neptune and Aries and this transit. It's good to reflect for yourself how you interact with this planet, how you let it manifest in your life. Are you somebody that is really open to it? Are you somebody that's maybe too open to it, and you're that person that has to cry every night because you feel the pain of the world? Are you maybe overly sensitive? You're so open to it and overly sensitive, and you can't handle the pain and the emotions that you end up trying to numb or shut it out. Are you somebody that doesn't allow it in at all? Maybe because you are afraid to feel the pain. Are you somebody that never thinks about these things, that never thinks about the fact that all of your striving in your career or in any other places really doesn't matter? It's good to reflect because I do think, um, as we talk about the horoscopes in a couple of minutes here, you can reflect on where in that spectrum you stand and what are the dangers that you might run into as Neptune goes through a specific house for you. Again, if you have any questions about Neptune, feel free to drop them in the chat. So let's talk a little bit more specifically, like we know what Neptune is about, but how does it manifest when it's in the sign of Aries? Because we're ending now Neptune in Pisces, and it's a very, very, very different energy from Neptune in Aries. So Neptune in Aries is us getting this sort of spiritual perspective, us getting in touch with this, with the compassion for others, us getting in touch with humanity in all of us by being in life or death situations. And I'm not saying that we all need to start doing very dangerous things once, March 30th rolls around. But there is definitely something about Neptune and Aries that says you need to bring some adventure. You need to take some risks. With Neptune and Aries, we really see this idea of when you are at your wit's end, when you are scared, when you're on the front lines of a battle line, when you are in the hospital and you're in this scary situation, there's sometimes nothing you can do. You just need to courageously move forward and see what happens. It's in those moments a lot of the times that you hear people say that's when people start praying. Everybody's an atheist until, they're in the hospital bed and they have 2 months to live. And then all of a sudden they're praying to God, please give me a couple more months. Neptune and Aries is all about how can we seek out these types of risky situations, these types of fearful situations where we can exercise our courage. And when we stare our fear in the face, it's in those situations that we start to see the humanity in things. It's in those situations that we feel and get in touch with something greater. It's in those situations that our spiritual understanding will start growing and start flourishing. Of course, as with everything, there are dangers. So with Neptune and Aries, of course, please be mindful not to take stupid risks or risks that you know are not going to turn out well, or take risk just for the sake of taking risks. And we know that Neptune has a tendency to want to escape, to numb. So be very mindful that you're not using risk taking as a way to escape the pain, as a way to numb the pain. Those can be some dangers with Neptune and Aries. But overall, if there's a way that you can take a risk in the next 14 years, if there's a way that you can do something that scares you, that will most likely nourish your spiritual side. And we'll get into the horoscopes in a second, so you'll know like what those types of risks are for you a little bit better. For some of us, there are risks in our career, risks in our relationships. So you'll hopefully get some more details as we go along. But feel free to drop your rising sign in the chat, and that way we'll get to yours first. You don't need to wait through all of the 12 zodiac signs. And this live will be reposted on my channel afterwards. So if you also ended up missing the beginning part where we talk about Neptune, where we talk about Neptune and Aries, you can go back and watch it. All right, let's start with Aries. Aries risings. You can, of course, watch this as well if you have an Aries sun sign. It will probably still be applicable. And for all of the Aries out there, Neptune is entering your first house. So that's really exciting. This is probably going to be really, really, really impactful for you in the next 14 years. How this will manifest, the next 14 years are about you taking leadership positions, you not being afraid to stand out from the crowd, and you being selfish. We don't always recommend this. Honestly, in today's society, we don't usually recommend being selfish. But that's what I love about astrology is it's not about prescribing a certain lifestyle. Some people are told be more selfish and others are told be more compromising. But for you, Aries, it's really about putting your needs first, being a little bit selfish, defending your boundaries. And especially we are talking about Neptune, defending your spiritual boundaries, making sure that you fight for your own time to spend on spiritual matters. Set boundaries so that people don't overstep your maybe your spiritual helping hand. A lot of the times with Neptune, we can get into this idea of, well, just help anybody, it doesn't matter. Like everybody deserves help. But Neptune and Aries in the first house, we also see this sort of the spirituality of saying no, the spirituality of setting boundaries, and how sometimes we can show more love to ourselves and that person if we say no. We can show more love to that person and be more helpful for them if we, whatever, set a boundary, cut them out of our life, whatever it may be. And again, this is the archetype of Aries. So it's really about taking action. It's really about doing it in a fiery way. Just think of it as like, this is war. If I don't set this boundary, that's the end. So we definitely need to take this sort of fighting warrior spirit with us with this Neptune and Aries transit. The dangers, Aries, with this Neptune in the first house transit is Neptune can make you able to really go with the crowd and sort of blend in with all sorts of different type of people. It's one of the beautiful things about Neptune that you can start identifying with all sorts of different people. With Neptune in your first house, be very, very mindful that doesn't start to become you, that you lose a sense of who you are, and that you just get swayed with whatever group you're hanging out with at whatever time. And in that sense, becoming a bit of an actor and not really who you really are. Again, we see this aspect of confusion that Neptune brings in. So there might be an element of being confused about your own identity with Neptune in your first house. All right, Aries, I hope you enjoy Neptune in your first house. It's definitely overall a period of incorporating spirituality as part of your identity. So definitely a really important period for you. Let me know in the chat what your rising sign is, and then we can make sure to get to yours first, and you don't need to wait through all of the 12 zodiac signs. But in the meantime, I'll move on to Taurus. So for Taurus, Neptune is going to enter your 12th house. This is actually a really nice transit because the 12th house is already a house that's associated with Neptune and with spirituality. So everything that we talked about in terms of Neptune as a planet, that is going to be like especially true, or you can think of it as like double the strength, double the intensity for you, Taurus, because it's also entering in a spiritual house. So in general, you can view the next 14 years as a time to grow spiritually. You can view it as a time to get in touch with the compassion that you have for others, intensify that, to, if you struggle with having compassion for others, to really cultivate that. The 12th house is also the house of, spending alone time. So definitely the next 14 years, you might find yourself slowing down, listening to your mind, sort of removing yourself from the rest of the world, spending alone time. And it's really this idea, Neptune in the 12th house, is that spirituality is not outside of you. Spirituality is not in a book, it's not in a mentor, it's not in something your friend says, it's not in your career. Spirituality is already within you. You already know what you need to do, you already know what it means, you already know what it looks like. All you have to do is sit down, slow down, and listen to yourself. What can also happen with the 12th house and Neptune traveling there is this feeling of feeling invisible, feeling anonymous, because the 12th house is the house where we let go of our ego, we let go of our identity. And Neptune does cause confusion. So there can be a feeling of, okay, yes, I feel anonymous, or I feel invisible. And I mean, honestly, it's not a nice thing to experience, or at least I can imagine. However, see if you can turn it into a spiritual insight or something that can strengthen your spirituality. When you feel invisible, when you realize that it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, it doesn't matter what your career is, it doesn't matter, who you're in a relationship with. When you truly feel invisible, who are you? Or why are you here? Tapping deeper, tapping into something deeper than just your identity. The 12th house is also the house of endings, so it's a good idea to just reflect on endings. Anything that ends in the next 14 years, Taurus, see if you can turn it into a spiritual opportunity. I can't help but think of those like cheesy, inspiring quotes we see online that are like, well, when one door closes, another door opens, or, well, if it's not meant for you, then let it go, or what was it? Or if it's meant for you, will come back. I can't help but think of those, but really, this is really true for you, Taurus, to be able to take any endings that are coming in the next 14 years, whether you change a job, you end a relationship, you move house, to take those endings and really turn them into a spiritual experience. Really let them teach you something about our greater purpose in life. Let them teach you something about why we're here. Let them teach you something about humanity, compassion. Definitely dive into those cheesy quotes in the next 14 years. And of course, we've got to mention the dangers of Neptune being in your 12th house, Taurus. Um, there can be sort of like amplified sensitivity, as we've already talked about when we talked about the planet Neptune. So just be really, really mindful that you might be feeling more sensitive. It might be difficult to watch the news because you just find yourself, yeah, feeling really sensitive, feeling really affected by what you hear. So you might find that you need to develop certain habits that will help you deal with that sensitivity. All right. Next up is Gemini. Let me know in the chats if you're excited about Neptune in Aries. I'm especially looking forward to it because it's entering my ninth house. It's leaving my eighth house. So I'm definitely excited. All right, let's talk about Gemini. For Gemini risings, this is also useful to watch if you're a Gemini sun sign. Neptune will be entering your 11th house. So for the next 14 years, you want to make sure that you hang out with spiritual people. And there might not necessarily be like spiritual people because they spend 8 hours on their meditation cushion or they're religious or I don't know, they chant or burn incense. But they are the people that when you hang out with them, they help give you perspective. They help remind you that we're all the same, that we're all humans, that it doesn't matter how much we achieve, that it's important to be compassionate with everybody. And yeah, maybe they're not the most spiritual people. We are talking about Neptune and Aries after all. Maybe they are literal people who have been to war, that have experienced war. And talking with them and spending time with them will definitely give you that greater perspective, that sense of something greater. And what's really important is that these people also align with you on a deeper level. When Neptune transits the 11th house, it asks from us, are these people that you really relate to on a deeper level, or are they just somebody in your life because you have the same job, or because you have whatever, the same car, or because your children go to the same school? And instead, we want to really say, no, I hang out with these people, I spend time with these people because we're on the same soul mission. Because after everything we've been through, we really understand each other. Those types of connections, Neptune is definitely going to ask of you in the next 14 years. And then, of course, I mean, it's the 11th house is also the house of our future plans, our future goals, our ambitions for the future. So we definitely want to start integrating spirituality into our future plans. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, yes, when I am 5 years from now, I'm going to be meditating 10 minutes a day. It can be, it definitely can be. But think about spirituality as something a little bit broader. Let's expand our viewpoint of spirituality. How can you maybe incorporate volunteering in your future? giving of your time, of your energy, of your resources to others without expecting anything in return. Maybe for you, spirituality and compassion and connecting with something greater means visiting your parents more often. So try not to blindside yourself by thinking of, I need to incorporate meditation in my future plans. And I mean, we are talking about Neptune and Aries in the 11th house. So if you need to cut off people that don't align, do so. Remember, Aries, it's this warrior energy. If you don't do it now, it's life or death. It needs to happen. You need to face your fears. If you're afraid to say a friend, I don't want to do this anymore. If you're afraid to go to a new friend group and be like, oh, can I hang out with you guys? Do it. That is what Neptune and Aries is about. Take risks with who you hang out with. Maybe even do adventurous things together, like go bungee jumping with your friends. Um, that's really important, especially because it's in the sign of Aries. And then, of course, we have to talk about the danger with Neptune in the 11th house. Remember, Neptune can sort of merge and go along with whatever's happening. So be very, very mindful that you don't end up doing that you don't just end up hanging out with people because you find it difficult to say no, because you see their humanity and you have compassion with them. And you end up saying, well, this is fine. It doesn't matter at the end of the day who my friends are. We're all going to die. Don't let that Neptunian disengagement with life start to affect your plans for the future and the community that you hang out with. Amazing. I feel like we're just whizzing by all of the zodiac signs today. So maybe we'll be done quicker than usual. Unless you have questions. If you have any questions on Neptune, on the specific aspects that it's making in your chart, just drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them, to go through them. Okay, let's talk about Cancer next. And for Cancer, we have Neptune transiting your 10th house. So you are one of the 4 zodiac signs who is probably going to feel this Neptune transit the most because it's in an angular house for you. And the 10th house is the house of career. It's the house of our mission. It's the house of the role we play in our society. And specifically for you, I mean, yes, this could mean that the next 14 years, it's about figuring out how can you incorporate spirituality more in your career? How can you perhaps align your career so that it's much more fitting to like your inner desires? But I also do think on a grander perspective, it also shows you becoming sort of like a symbol to others, to the rest of society, as somebody that's deeply compassionate, as somebody that's deeply dedicated to walking life in this spiritual manner. And if you think about it, you can do that in any job. You can be an engineer and still be considered by people around you as somebody that has the most compassion and the most understanding, as somebody that is spiritual, somebody that has a sense of something greater. There's no need for you to say, okay, well, I'm going to go become a monk with this transit. So think about, or you are going to think about, Neptune is going to ask you to think about, how can you devote yourself more to this inner path? And how can you make sure that society around you, people around you, start to see you as a spiritual figure, as somebody that's devoted to living in this compassionate and humane way? So that means take risks. Neptune is in Aries, the sign of the warrior. Take risks with your career. Take risks with things you sign up for. Take risks with how you show up towards others and what role you play towards them. Maybe you've always been somebody that has provided or brought a lot of food at picnics. I don't know. And take risks. Just say all of a sudden, no, I'm not somebody that does that. Or you've always been somebody that's been really stoic and really seen as somebody that keeps it together. And with Neptune in Aries, you start to say, no, I want to become somebody that's open. I'm going to change the perception that others have of me to show this more spiritual side of myself. And then, of course, the danger with Neptune in the 10th house is getting too caught up with this image, building a perfect image. Neptune, again, can lead to a bit of confusion, a bit of like what's really true. Neptune can lead to like glory is maybe not the right word, fame, this idea of things being like, wow, amazing. So be very mindful as Neptune transits your 10th house, not to get too caught up in creating this ethereal image for others. Right. Next up, let's do Leo. This is Neptune in the 9th house. So as I shared, this is me as well. So I'm very excited for Neptune to be entering my 9th house. But let's talk about this for all the other Leos as well. So with Neptune entering the 9th house for the next 14 years, it means that it's time to think about the spiritual philosophy in your life. And by that, I mean, maybe every once in a while you think like, oh, where do I stand politically? Or you think, oh, where do I stand on economically? What do I actually think about death? What do I actually think about relationships? With Neptune in your 9th house, you're going to be a lot more focused on what do I actually think about spirituality? What does spirituality mean to me? Like, what is my philosophy? What do I believe about it? So you might find yourself really thinking about those things. And as a result, you might find yourself really seeking out spiritual education, starting to read books about different types of religions or different lifestyles, or reading books on, other spiritual topics. And because the 9th house is also the house of travel, you might find yourself really seeking out spiritual travel. And again, it doesn't have to be places, like, okay, we're going to a church, we're going to go visit a church, or we're going to go visit a mosque. It can be, of course, it definitely can be. But with Neptune in the 9th house, it might be literally the most random place, but you are traveling, you are visiting a new place. It could be in the market in Marrakesh. But Neptune in the 9th house shows that you might still have a really powerful, really spiritual, transcendental experience when you are traveling. That you might be in that market in Marrakesh. And even though nobody in their right mind would say, oh my God, this is so spiritual, because there's literally, like monkeys on chains, and there's people like scamming each other, and that guy over there just got robbed, and people yelling. There is still something within you that is there, and that gets a realization, an epiphany about the greater meaning of life, about the perspective of why we're here, about the connection between all of us. Gets flooded with compassion, gets flooded with understanding for humanity and life and how hard it can be. So definitely with Neptune and Aries in your ninth house, take risks with your travel. Take opportunities when you're traveling. Take all of them if they come your way. Go, pack your bags, and take risks with your education. Don't be afraid to read something that people might judge you for it. People might be like, "Oh, why is this person reading a book from this author?" Don't be afraid to take risks, and don't be afraid to take risks with exploring what sort of different spiritual philosophy you might want to adopt. Treat it as a life or death situation. I need to do it. And I'll just mention the dangers before moving on to the next zodiac sign. The danger when we have Neptune in the ninth house is becoming too dogmatic, being somebody that has found a belief that works for them and then tries to convert everybody else to the same belief. Neptune can also be, as we've mentioned, can lead to confusion. Neptune is very good at disguising itself and going along with what everybody else is doing. So be very mindful that you don't do the same when it comes to your spiritual philosophy. That you don't just go with the flow of what everybody else around you believes. Amazing. All right, next up, we're going to do Virgo. If you have any questions, by the way, of anything we've mentioned, or you have specific aspects happening in your own birth chart, just drop them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. Nice. I see Steph is excited about Virgo. All right, so this for Steph and for everybody else who is Virgo rising, also applicable if you have Virgo sun sign. Neptune will be transiting your 8th house. And this is all about getting in touch with intimacy, being intimate with somebody, and allowing that to lead to a sort of spiritual connection or spiritual understanding. It's this idea of being open with somebody, being vulnerable with somebody, sharing parts of yourself that you might think are scary to share. And when you do that, when you look at that fear in the face and you say, this is life or death, I'm doing it, I need to do it right now, that there is a sort of spiritual epiphany or spiritual understanding that you gain along the way. The 8th house is also about other taboo topics like money and death. So you might definitely find yourself just talking more about those topics with others. And you might find, just engaging on those topics, whether in your own mind or when talking with others, gets you to start touch with this spiritual understanding. When you start talking to people about like, okay, but what is money? What is it really as a concept? And how does it work? And what does it mean? That helps provide this sort of perspective of what life is about, what matters and what doesn't matter. And the same with death. Talking to people, thinking about topics such as death, it might really help bring this deeper perspective, this deeper knowing within you. What could also help with gaining this spiritual understanding, the spiritual power, is also being around people that are dying. Maybe volunteering in a hospice or at a hospital, being literally faced with death, those are probably going to be experiences in the next 14 years. If you feel ready to take them, those are going to be experiences that really, really get you in touch with something greater. And it could also mean keeping your own death in mind as well, contemplating on, yeah, your own death. We're getting quite morbid here. Um, you might find that it can feel like something that's allowing you to have better perspective, allowing you to have more compassion for others. Um, so it could be something that helps you benefit spiritually. So, with Neptune and Aries, the warrior, doing things we fear, really do take risks on what you share, how deep you share with others. Really allow yourself to connect with people on taboo topics. And one thing that you do have to be aware of, one danger with Neptune in your eighth house, is this danger of just becoming more moody and more dramatic. To be fair, I already got depressed just 2 minutes talking about death. But it can definitely have that effect. Neptune in the eighth house, it can make you focus a lot more on these topics. And indeed, the danger with Neptune in general, when we get this sort of perspective of, well, it doesn't matter what we achieve, we can take it all the way and say, well, then why get out of bed? Well, then why show up to work? And Neptune in the eighth house can have that effect. Well, if we're all going to die, like, yeah, why am I getting out of bed? Why am I even trying? Why be nice to people? So definitely do be mindful that you don't allow that sort of Neptunian disattachment from life to affect you. So I hope that didn't scare you, Steph, or other Virgos. I hope you're excited for the transit and not scared. All right, let's talk about Libra next. So for Libra, Neptune will be in your seventh house. And this is true for Libra risings as well as Libra sun signs. And it's really about diving into close relationships because these will help you in a spiritual way. These will help you gain perspective, find perspective, help you get in touch with the more compassionate side of you. And what could also really help in the next 14 years, or I'm not only going to help, but what you're going to find is very important, is to connect on a spiritual level with your partner. All of a sudden, it's not going to be enough for you to, just have pleasantries of, oh, what did you do today? Oh, how was your work? Oh, we need to give our kid a bath. There's going to be a need for you to want to connect on a deeper level and to really explore that together with your partner. So, maybe you read a spiritual book together, you take a spiritual course together. Maybe, we are talking about Neptune and Aries, maybe you're active together, you take risks together. Maybe you're both scared to start a new business, but you've been talking about it forever. Do it. With Neptune and Aries, do it. Taking risks with your partner in the next 14 years is going to get you in touch with a more spiritual side of you. And then, of course, let's talk about the dangers, Libra. So this is the danger of merging too much with your partner. Neptune can have this like fluid identity. getting your identity confused with your partner, meshing too much, codependency. These can definitely be dangers of Neptune in the seventh house. And you might find yourself, because you have this greater compassion, you might find yourself attracting people that are maybe dealing with addiction, or um, people that sort of need help, because you have all this compassion and all this love to give. So you might definitely draw those types of people. So be really, really mindful with Neptune in the seventh house, not to lose yourself, not to lose yourself in your partner, not to lose yourself in trying to help a partner, trying to give of yourself to them. Again, it's Neptune and Aries. So sometimes setting a boundary with your partner can be the most spiritual experience that both of you can have together, honestly. So don't be afraid. Aries is about a good fight. Nice. I'm happy to hear it resonates, stuff. I usually find with transits that it's not like, on the day of Neptune entering Aries, I all of a sudden wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel like talking about death. Because I just had Neptune in Aries, or sorry, Neptune in the eighth house. I always find with transits, though, they definitely start to play out maybe 3 months before they actually happen, especially with these longer ones like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, probably even Saturn. About 3 months before, I already find myself sort of moving towards that direction. Yeah, so it definitely makes sense that you are too. All right, Scorpio, let's have a chat about Neptune in Aries for you and what you can expect. So, Neptune will be transiting your sixth house. And what's going to help you become more spiritual, what's going to help you gain a perspective of the things in life that matter, is your routine. And it's not even so much about the specific routine as much as it is about just having a routine and sticking to it. What's going to help you get this deeper spiritual perspective is just picking something. 5 minutes of meditation. Doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes of meditation, if it's 5 minutes of dancing, if it's every night before bed, I'm going to say 3 things I'm grateful for. It really does not matter. It's more about doing it consistently and making it a habit. And the consistency and the buildup over time is going to get you in touch with this more spiritual side of you, with the compassionate side of you. So, really, with this one, skipping one day does matter. It's not as simple as, well, it doesn't matter. Like, if I just skip one day, it matters, Scorpio. In the next 14 years, if the only thing you can do is like 2 deep breaths while you are on your way to work, and that is your spiritual practice, you're going to find immense benefits. The sixth house is also the house of mentors. So it could be that you find yourself attracting spiritual mentors during this time, or people trying to sort of guide you and tell you about what worked for them spiritually. So do keep an open mind, listen, and be okay with others knowing a little bit more than you, or having advice for you. And of course, the sixth house is also about service. So, what's really going to help you during the next 14 years is to focus on others' problems more than your own. See if you can be of service to others, help them in some way with a certain skill you have. Um, when you focus on helping others, you are going to find that you forget your own troubles, and that again, you can get in touch with this more compassionate spiritual side of you. And the sixth house is also about our health. Neptune being there, you might find yourself really being influenced, your health really being influenced by sort of like things that are not really visible. Neptune in the sixth house is like, when people say, like, oh, your energy is just like making me sick, or like, like, oh, this food, it wasn't prepared with love and I can feel it in my digestion. Like, you cannot see like a food prepared with love or a food prepared with hate. Visually, you cannot see a stinking difference. At least I don't think so. Feel free to prove me wrong in the chat. But with Neptune transiting your sixth house, there's definitely going to be health repercussions for you from these sort of invisible forces. If you eat food that's not cooked with love, if you go to sleep while angry with your partner, all of these sort of like unseen things and energetic things, they are going to have an effect on you. Maybe even the environment that you're in. If you go to a work where like everybody's super stressed and not talking to each other and the vibe is off, it's really going to start affecting your health. So make sure you take care of that. So yeah, to summarize, Neptune and Aries in your sixth house, Scorpio. Be open to mentors. Maybe your mentor is a feisty mentor. Maybe it's a mentor that literally went to war at one point. Maybe you want to incorporate a spiritual practice that is actually active. Maybe it's not about 5 minutes of meditation a day. Maybe it's about once a month, I go bungee jumping, and that is my routine. So take risks with what you pick as the habit to have for the next 14 years. We're almost there. We have about four. Yeah, we have four more zodiac signs to go through. Let's talk about Sagittarius next. So for Sagittarius, Neptune is going to be in your fifth house, a little bit more of a fun place to have it. This is really the idea of the next 14 years using play and creativity as your spiritual practice. If somebody's like, oh, well, I'm going to church on Sunday, you want to say, well, I'm going to go and work on my coloring book, or, oh, I'm going to go and dance. That is your church. See if you can seek out these states of flow, these states where you can really get lost in the activity that you're doing. And even if it's not creative in the traditional sense of like you're literally painting, it could be dancing, it could be writing poetry, um, anything that you would consider creative, just doodling. As long as you get lost in the flow of it, that will really, really help you with getting in touch with this deeper spiritual side and help you with becoming more compassionate, more loving. What can also help, this is the house of children. See if you can connect with children more often. Maybe you want to volunteer at a kindergarten, or you want to start babysitting. Being around children during the next 14 years with Neptune in the fifth house, you might find that children really teach you about the meaning of life and why we're here, and help you keep perspective on the things that matter and the things that don't. So do take risks with your creative activities. Try something new. Maybe do a more risky creative activity. I don't know. Maybe if you always been fearful of trying like ecstatic dancing. I think that's what it's called, ecstatic dancing. It's quite popular nowadays. Just do it, try it. Maybe you've been really scared, you've wanted to try pole dancing for a while. Do it. We are talking about Aries. So, this activity, this hobby that you're trying to do, this creative thing you're trying to do, it could very well be a sport, something active. Um, Again, like I said, it doesn't have to be creative in the sense that you're sitting and painting. As long as it gets you in that state of flow, then it does count. And before we close it off, Sagittarius, of course, we have to talk about the dangers of Neptune in your fifth house. Be very, very mindful of escapism and trying to escape in pleasure and fun. Life can be hard for sure. And sometimes when we find something that makes us feel good, we want to do it over and over and over and over again. So be very mindful that the things that bring you joy, you don't start using them as a way to escape from the rest of life. It can feel really fun, but after a while, it can turn into you just avoiding life. Alrighty. Let's move on to Capricorn. And again, if you have any questions at all about Neptune and Aries, maybe certain aspects it makes with a part of your chart, just drop them down in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. So for Capricorns, Neptune is going to enter your fourth house on March 30th. So this is all about getting in touch with your emotions, really feeling them. And when you do that, you're able to reap this beautiful spiritual outlook on life, this beautiful spiritual perspective on things. And in order to be able to feel your emotions, to get in touch with them, you do need some quiet, you do need some alone time. And you do need to maybe even literally remove yourself from others, shield yourself from others' emotions. Remember, we talked about Neptune can be quite absorbent and quite malleable. So be very mindful not to get too sidetracked with others' emotions. For a lot of us, the place where we can get alone time and quiet time is our home. So you might find that for the next 14 years, spending alone time in your home, spending a lot of time at home would really help you with getting in touch with the spiritual side of you. What could also help is your dreams and your sleep. Be very mindful of making sure you get enough sleep, maybe even giving yourself more sleep than usual. It's maybe even a good idea to pay attention to your dreams, keep a dream journal. These will be really fruitful things that might give you perspectives perspectives on spirituality and perspectives on what matters in life. And then finally, of course, the fourth house is all about family. And it could mean that you are seeking more spiritual connection with your literal, biological family. But it could also be about finding your own spiritual family. Somebody that you connect with and feels like home because you're aligned on the same mission, on the same purpose. There needs to be that sort of safe haven. So therefore, Neptune being in Aries, the sign of the warrior, fight for your quiet time. Fight for it as if it's life or death. If somebody says, oh, like, what are you doing tonight? Let's hang out. And it's going to infringe on your quiet time when you were planning to go home and really journal and process your emotions from that day. say no as if they just asked you to do something illegal. You're like, nope, not me, not tonight. Also, take risks in finding your spiritual family. Try hanging out with different people so that you can see what works and what doesn't. Um, Maybe even saying no if you have a spiritual family that doesn't fit currently. And the danger for Neptune in the fourth house is escaping into nothingness and no social contact. So, the fourth house, we're spending alone time, we're spending time at home. Be mindful that you don't start using that as a way to escape real life, and to a point where you're like, yeah, okay, I'm not going home to process my emotions, or to take a rest. I'm going home because I'm too afraid to face others, or because I am, I don't want to deal with the world right now. I want to just escape it because it's difficult. So it's very important that the time that you spend alone, um, is also fruitful. Right. So we have Aquarius left and Pisces left. If you're just joining and you missed your zodiac sign, don't worry. This video will be uploaded after the live so you can go back and watch your zodiac sign. I'll put the timestamps in there. So make sure you subscribe so then you can find the video again in the future. Right, Aquarius. So for Aquarius, Neptune on March 30th is going to enter your third house. Um, this is the house of perception. So you definitely want to make sure you are open. You open your perception to spiritual things. You are not quick to dismiss when you see something or you hear something and you're a bit like, where did that come from? Why did I hear that thing? Like, what? Um, Wait a second. Like, I've had so many people this week telling me about Egypt. Or wait a second, I've been seeing number 33 everywhere. So be very, very open in your perception. You might find that the synchronicities that are happening, the things you're seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, are helping you keep a perspective of life, a perspective of what matters. And of course, the house of perception is also about communication. So when you take moments to communicate, to share what's on your mind, to share your thoughts and your ideas with others, that also gets you in touch with the more spiritual side of you. You might find yourself during this time talking to somebody and then realizing, wow, I said something and I had no idea that I knew that, or I have no idea where that came from. I wasn't planning to say that, or I've never said that before. So if communication is not a regular part of your life, I mean, of course, we all communicate, but you know what I mean? Like, communication on a deeper perspective is not part of your life. See if you can incorporate it in the next 14 years. Whether that's journaling, whether that's writing poetry, it could be communication in other ways, communication through painting or writing music. Um, you might find that the things coming from you are, yeah, much more on that spiritual level. And of course, with the third house being the house of perception, curiosity, do remain open, do ask questions, be curious specifically about spirituality. Talk to others about spirituality. Ask them, what does it mean to them? What do they do? What does it look like? Just continue to ask and to be curious and to almost be like the journalist and just take inventory of, yeah, what is spirituality to everybody around you? What does it mean? How does it look like? And because we are talking about Aries, the sign of the warrior, take risks when you do that. Take risks in the questions you ask. Maybe usually your question would be like, okay, like what is spirituality to you? Ask a more ballsy question. Ask like, yeah, why are you spiritual when you don't get anything out of it? Ask the more risky questions. Take risks with who you talk to. Take risks with what you say, communication, the house of communication. And then, of course, we have to mention the danger with Neptune in the third house. Neptune can cause confusion. We've mentioned that a couple of times already. So be very mindful of mental confusion, disorganization of your thoughts and your words. It can definitely happen. Um, and what helps is not to try and fight the confusion or the disorganization. Try to go with it. And usually you will find by the end, actually, there is sort of like a red line, and what you're saying does make sense. All right, we've made it. We are on the last zodiac sign, which is Pisces. Make sure if you want me to talk about any questions that you have about Neptune, drop them in the chat right now while I talk about Pisces, and then we'll make sure to talk about them before we close off the live. So for Pisces, Neptune on March 30th is going to enter your second house, the house of finances. We do see a need in the next 14 years for you to invest financially in your spirituality. It could be signing up for a spiritual course and spending money on it. The second house is also about like physical things. So you could find that having physical items uh, to represent your spirituality or to get you in touch with your spirituality really help. It can be something like very stereotypically associated with spirituality, like the prayer beads or like the rosary, I think it's called. It could literally be a statue of Mary, Jesus, the Buddha. But it could be other things as well, like maybe part of your practice is when you do meditation that you cover yourself in a really soft blanket that gives you a lot of comfort. But definitely allow yourself to let objects get you in touch with the spiritual side of you. And, a question that might be on top of mind for you, Pisces, in the next 14 years is, what role does money play in your life, and how much power? How much power do you give it? Um, if you have a lot of money, do you give it all the power? Do you let it be a thing that you think about it all the time? You always care about it. You always talk about it. You always spend time trying to make it. Or do you give it no power and then you swing on the opposite spectrum? Again, not saying either is good or bad, but maybe you swing to the opposite side of the spectrum. That maybe you think, well, money doesn't really matter, and you're sort of this martyr that lives without, that forgets that actually when we are taken care of physically, when we're not hungry, when we are not figuring out where am I going to sleep tonight, then we have the space, the mental capacity, the emotional capacity to wonder about these more deeper spiritual questions. So do reflect for yourself, Pisces, where on that spectrum you stand. And in the next 14 years, Neptune might ask you to consider, like, or to practice, okay, what does it look like being without money or being with money? So you might find yourself swinging to either side of the spectrum and really seeing the spiritual effect having money or not having money is having on you. With Neptune being in Aries, take this as a life or death decision, take some financial risks, take risks in terms of what spiritual objects you have around you. And do be mindful of inflating the amount of money you have with like a sort of like a spiritual ego. And the opposite as well. Be very mindful of hating money and thinking that in order to be spiritual, you need to denounce all money and give all of it up. Neptune can cause some confusion there. Can cause disillusionment. That's the right word. It can cause disillusionment, so that you can't see it clearly. You think, okay, I have money now. Now I can finally be spiritual, or the other way around. Like now, finally, I don't have money. I'm pure. I'm not tainted. So finances, objects, self-esteem, self-doubt, those will be top of mind, Pisces. Amazing. We did it. So those were the 12 rising sign horoscopes for Neptune in Aries. We have 6 days. Neptune will enter Aries on March 30th. And I do hope this live has been useful for you and that you're able to get a little bit of a glimpse on what you can expect. And as I shared when we first started, Neptune will be in Aries for 14 years. So really don't feel like you're in a rush to get it all figured out right on the 30th. And I think with Neptune, it's a really interesting planet because it's not a planet that's very prominent in today's society. It's not a part of our life that's very prominent in today's society. I would say like the sun or Mars or Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. Neptune is much more fluid. It's much more hard to pin down. A lot of the times it's like, why even pursue it? Like what do we get out of it? Why does it really matter? And I do think we can have a tendency in society to say, well, if somebody doesn't have a spiritual life, they'll be just fine. Whereas, for example, if somebody doesn't have an ego, they're not going to be okay. If somebody doesn't have love, they're not going to be okay. And so I do think this Neptune and Aries transit, in a way, can also maybe not feel so prominent in our lives because we're also not, it's not something we're looking out for. It's not something we're focused on. Or it's not something that's top of mind for us. But I think especially if you're somebody that has Neptune prominent in their birth chart, if you have it in your angular houses, if you have it conjuncting your angles, your ascendant, if you have it conjuncting your sun or your moon, then I do think the movements of Neptune will be felt more strongly. And like all of that being said, There is so much more depth that we can get into when there is a birth chart reading, because we that's what we look at, like I sit down and I look at not only, okay, Neptune is in your ninth house, but I look at, wow, it's actually going to oppose your IC, and it's going to square your moon, and we can get into so many more details. So what I'll do is I'll drop the link where you can book a one-on-one birth chart reading. If you're definitely somebody that feels, we're talking about Neptune after all, that feels, has an intuition that this is going to be a transit that's important for them, I do think that getting guidance never hurts. It never hurts. Thank you for joining me for this live. I hope you all enjoy Neptune and Aries. I hope we can all realize that sometimes saying no and sometimes fighting for things is also being spiritual. Spirituality is not just sitting on a meditation cushion. Thanks, everybody. Uh, Enjoy the last 6 days of Neptune and Pisces. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon.